Hello everyone and welcome back to another video, and I have an interesting application for you today. So we're going to build a mobile application in React Native Expo, which is going to use the random user API to get some data about a random user, such as the image, the name, the age, the date of birth, and then we're going to display it on the screen, as you can see right here. Now this design was inspired by something that I saw on Dribble, and the design is called User Profile by Elton Guti Lamptey. I can't pronounce that name. If I butchered it, I'm really sorry. But this is the design. So I looked at this and it reminded me of the random user API. So we are building something similar to this, and you can see that this is what we have on the screen. So every time that you load the application, it's going to generate a random user. And if you don't like what you see, then what you can do is just click on this button on the bottom that says get another random user. And when you click on it, then it fetches some data, and you can see that we have some kind of loading state. And then once it gets that data, then it displays it to you on the screen. And we're going to be using React Native components such as the view to display the content inside here, and the touchable opacity for our button, so that when you click on it, then it offers a touch feedback. You can see that it is now slightly opaque, and then when you let go of it, then it goes back to the original button right there. So that is what we're going to be building, and we're going to be using React Native Expo and Tailwind CSS. And I didn't know about this. I discovered this a few weeks ago. You can use Tailwind CSS in React Native. And safe to say, I'm going to be using it for every other project because I hate the default styling of React Native. I just hate it, you know. And so yeah, that is the overview of the application that we're going to be building. So tentatively, let us begin right away. And so to begin, I have my terminal open, and I'm going to cd into my desktop. And then inside my desktop, I have a folder that is called mobile apps. So I'm going to say cd into mobile apps. And then inside here, I'm going to say npx create expo app. And then I'm going to call this random user -yt. And then I'm going to let this run. And then once it finishes, we are going to continue. And so once that finishes running, I'm going to say cd into random user. So random user -yt. And then I'm going to open up Visual Studio Code by saying code dot. And there we go. So we have Visual Studio Code opened, and you can see that we have the assets folder, we have the gitignore and all the other files that are generated with create expo app. Now what I want to do is I'm going to close this, and then I want to talk about this for a moment. So I'm currently running a Linux system called Fedora, and it has an application that is called Screen Copy. So it is called scrcpy Screen Copy, and you have to install it obviously. But what that does is that it helps me to mirror my phone screen on my desktop, and that makes it easier even when recording, so that I don't have to merge multiple videos. And this also helps me because when I want to explain something, I can easily point to it using my mouse. And once again, the program is called Screen Copy, so scrcpy. So if you're running some kind of Linux system where you want to use this, you can just go ahead and Google it, and then you can follow the install procedures for your system. You have to connect your device using a USB, but there is a way where you can connect to it over Wi-Fi, but I've not established that because I prefer to use my USB. Now with that being said, then my application, once we begin to run this application, I'm going to be running it on my physical device, and it is going to be mirrored on this right side, as you can see. Now, just to give you a demonstration, I'm going to say Ctrl J to open up my terminal. And then once it opens up, I'm going to go ahead and say npm run start. And then on my device, I should mention I have an application called Expo Go. And this is what is going to help me to run the application as we're developing. It is going to help me to run the application on my physical device. So you can go into the App Store or the Play Store. You can install the application. It's called Expo Go. And then once this opens up, it is going to give us a QR code. But once you're running Expo Go, you can just click on the most recently opened application, and then it's just going to like remove the previous cache of an application that you are building, and it's going to use the new cache that is going to be generated from here. So let this open up. You can see we have our QR code right here. You can go ahead and scan it by saying scan QR code, but I'm just going to go ahead and click on this recently opened one, and then I'm going to click on it, and it should generate the new application that we have, meaning on the screen we should only see this text that says open app.js to start working on your app. So let this reload, and it says can't connect, so let's click the R button in our terminal, so R to reload our application, and there we go. And there we go. So we can see that our application is running, and it says open up app.js to start working on your app. Now, if you don't want to run your app on a physical device, there is some quite good documentation on the Expo website or on the React Native website, which you can follow if you want to open up your app in an emulator using Android Studio. And so now that we have verified that our application is running, what I want to do next is I want to go ahead and install Tailwind CSS for the native platform, and it is actually called Tailwind. So if you go into their website, which is Tailwind, then we can go into their home here. Actually, we are using Expo, so we can just click on Expo, and it is going to give us a step-by-step guide. So the first thing that we need to do is create an Expo application, which I've done, and then we need to install Tailwind, and then we need to install Tailwind CSS as a dev dependency. So we're going to do the following. We're going to shut down this terminal because we're going to be changing something in the Babel config. So I'm going to say npm install native wind, and then let that run. And then we need to go ahead and say npm install --dev tailwind css, and then let that run as well. There we go. And then it says here that we should go ahead and create our Tailwind config file. Now, just to mention, if you're using yarn, this is the command that you use. I'm not using yarn, I'm using npm. That's why I said npm install in place of yarn add. So next we need to go ahead and say npx tailwind css init, and then we need to copy this part. So let's just copy it preemptively, and then let's go back to our terminal. Let's say npx tailwind css init, and this is going to generate a Tailwind config file for us right there. And then when we go inside this file, then we're going to have some content here which we need to replace. So just paste in what we copied. And what this does is that it is going to check our directories if we're going to create some other custom directories such as other pages or screens. In React Native, they're called screens. So it's going to check all those folders for any type of JavaScript file or JSX or TypeScript file, and then it's going to check for Tailwind classes within them, and then it's going to make sure that the classes are actually working. So in this case, we want to go ahead and create a file here called components, because we're going to be creating a folder called components. So let's go ahead and save that, and then let's go back inside here. We need to now go and configure the Babel config.js to add the Tailwind plugin. Let's just copy this part, and then back inside our workspace, inside the Babel config.js, right below the presets, we're just going to paste this in and save it. And then that's it. So we should be able to run our application again. So let me go ahead and say npm run start, which is going to restart our dev server. So let this run. There we go. And then once it runs, you can just go into your terminal and hit R, which is going to reload your application. And there we go. So we have our application running. Now to test it out, we can go into app.js, and we can remove this style sheet because we are no longer using it. And then we can also remove its import, but we can go right inside here. And then just like you would on the web, you can add class names. So I'm going to say give it a class name of bg rows 400, and we should be able to see a bg of rows 400, a red background. And it says, okay, so I don't fully understand this error, but I know what is causing it. So if you check your package.json file, you will find that Tailwind is on version 3.4.1. And so what we need to do is to downgrade this to version 3.3.2. That is the version that works with Tailwind. So all we need to do is just once again shut down our server. Let me scroll down so that you can see this. So we're going to shut down our server, and then I'm going to say npm install dash dash dev, and then say tailwind css at, okay, my text is overlapping. Let me close this. Let's do this. Let's just say clear, really clear. Oh, how am I mistyping that? So let's say npm install dash dash dev and tailwind css, and we're going to say at 3.3.2 so that it installs the 3.3.2 version. So enter, and then you'll notice that this is going to get downgraded once this finishes. And there we go. So we can see that we have version 3.3.2. Now when we restart our server, so npm run start, then it should work correctly. So once again, we can hit R on our keyboard, and it's going to reload this. And there we go. If you check on the top part right here, you can see that the BG of rows 400 is working. So now what you can do, if you want to see it better, you can just say flex 1 and height of screen, and it should now fill up the entire screen. There we go. Looking nice. Now, obviously, this is not the style that you want for our application. So I'm going to remove these classes from here. And then what I'm going to do is I want to go ahead and create our state values so that we can begin to get the data from the random user API. So I'm going to say import use state and use effect from React. And this is just the same if you're coming from the web. And then I'm going to say const users, or let me say user because it's a random user. And then set user is equal to use state. And by default, it's going to be an empty array. And then I also want to add another state value here called is loading, and set is loading, obviously for our loading state. And by default, it is going to be false. And you know what? By default, it is going to be true because we want that if our application has nothing to show on the screen, then the loading state shows. And then let's go ahead and create our function to get our data. So I'm going to say async function get user. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to add in a try catch block. So in case of an error, let's just say console.error the error. And let me spell this correctly. And then inside I'm going to say const res is equal to await fetch. And we are fetching from https:// randomuser.me/API. And then the data that we get back, I want to say await res.json. And then I'm going to say set user into the data dot results. And let me show you where results is coming from. If we take a look at the API right here, you will notice that we get back an object, but we want the results array. So that's why I'm saying that we want to go into the results array so that we can actually get the correct data that we want to display on the screen. So that's why we have here, we are setting the user into data.results. Now, once we do that, let's go ahead and add our use effect. So use effect, and then I'm going to say inside here, then we want to go and call our function called get user. And let's remember to add an empty dependency array so that this use effect, this function is only going to run once, and it's going to run on the initial render and every subsequent re-render after that. And then now what we can do is this. We can move this upwards, and then we can now change this text. So you can say the text component is going to render, let me just say results, sorry, not results, but user.length. And we should get some kind of number on the screen if all is well. Let's save it. Let's see. So we get 1. Now, I don't know whether you can see it, but on my phone it's a bit obscured because my phone curves on the top left, but we're getting 1. Now, you can add this, we can make this bigger. You can say give the class name of text 4XL and font bold, and we should be able to see 1 right there. So that is what we get. Now we need to go ahead and begin to display this data to the user. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a component here that is called a scroll view. And what a scroll view does is that it just checks for whether the data that is currently on the screen requires a scroll bar to be enabled. So if the data surpasses the height of the device, for example here, then you're going to be able to scroll over the data so that you can actually see everything, as opposed to using a view. If we were to use a view and the data goes past the maximum height of the device, then you're not going to be able to scroll through everything. So you want to get the scroll view here, and then we want to import it from React Native. So make sure that it is imported on top on React from React Native. And this is a scroll view, not scroll view. And then what I want to do is the scroll view component has a prop that is called shows vertical scroll indicator. So whether or not to show the scroll bar while you're scrolling. I'm going to set this to false because I don't want the scroll bar to be visible. So we can save that and nothing is going to change on the screen, but now we can begin to get our data. So the first thing that I'm going to do is this. I'm going to create a parent view component. Now this view component is going to be the parent of every other thing that we're going to be having inside here, the personal details as well as the other details that are going to be displaying. So we're going to do the following. We're going to say inside this view is going to have another view. Now you can think of views as divs in the web, in HTML. So every view that you want is basically a div. So inside this first view, what I want to do is the following. I'm going to say that I want to have an image, and this image component, make sure that you import it from React Native. And what I've done there is control spacebar. It gives me this drop down, and then I can select whether to import it from React Native. For example, if I wanted to import image background, I can just click on this, and if I check on top, then you can see that it is imported from React Native. But we're not using the image background, so just delete that and then change this back to image. And the image component takes in a source prop, so source. And because the image that we want to display inside here is coming from the internet, then it takes in a URI here as an object, and the URI I'm going to set it to something inside here. And you know what, I've done something wrong here because we need to map over our data before we can begin to display it. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to cut this view, the parent view, cut it out, and then I'm going to say this. I'm going to say when is loading is true, then I want to render some kind of loading state. And in React Native, there's a component that is called activity indicator. So activity indicator, just import it. And then I want to give it a prop called size. And I want to set this to large. And then when is loading is not true, then I want to say user, which is our state value right here. So I'm going to say user dot map. And then for every user that I get back, I'm just going to call it u. And you know what? That's probably not good. Let's rename our state value. So rename this to users, and then I'm going to call this for every user. So I'm going to rename our state value. So change this to users, change this to users, and then change this to users. That is much better, so that we can say that users.map, and then for every user that we get back, then I want to render a parent div, which is the div that I just cut out, remember? And then now we can see that the URI for the image here is going to become from user dot picture dot large. Now this is coming from the API. If you take a look at the API, we have the results here, and if you take a look at the results array, if you scroll to the bottom, we have a picture object which has the large image, the medium image, and then the thumbnail image. So this is the one that I'm selecting when I say user.picture.large, and then I'm going to give this a class name, and I'm going to say give it a width of about 20 and a height of 20 and a rounded of full, so that it is completely rounded. And I think that should be good. Let's go ahead and save that. And we have the activity indicator. That means that this is working. Now remember that is loading is true by default, right? And what we're saying here is when is loading is true, which is its current state, then we want to display the activity indicator. So this loading thingy right here. Now I want this to be centered. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this out, render it inside a view, and close it out. And then inside this view, I'm going to give this view a class name of flex-1 height-screen, and it should now bring it to the center right here. And you know what, I should say items-center, we should now bring it to the center. And let me say justify center, see if that is going to bring it to the center. And there we go. So it is now to the center. And then the next thing that I want to do is this. I want to go inside the scroll view, and I want to give the scroll view a class name of bg neutral, and you know, not neutral but stone should be it, bg stone dash, let's see, bg stone dash 800, so that now this is how our background is going to look like. And then the status bar is this part right here on the top. I want to give it a style of light so that we can actually see the icons on our status bar. And so there we go. So now that we know that our loading state is working, we need to turn it back to negate it to false. So what I'm going to do is inside the try catch block, I'm just going to go on top and then I'm going to say set is loading to true. Now I do realize that the default value of is loading is true, but this is just a precautionary check. Okay, so just in case I forget and I turn this to false, for example, so if I turn it to false, or I actually spelled it correctly, if I turn it to false, you notice that the loading state is still there, even though this, because right here we are setting it to true. And then I want that after we get our data right here, after we set users into data.results, then I want to say set is loading to false. And that should be good. So let's go ahead and save it. And we have nothing on the screen. So it says, there we go. Look at that. We have the picture right here. We have the picture showing on the top left. Now it says each text in a list should have a unique key. This is just from React. All you need to do is just add a key prop here, and we can give it a prop of user.login.uuid. And once again, this is coming from the API. So if you take a look at the API, we have a login object here, and then we can access the UUID of the user, which we can guarantee that is always going to be unique. Now for the key doesn't have to be the UUID. So for example, if you have some kind of data and you are sure that the username in that piece of data that you have is going to be unique for all of them, you can use the username as the unique key. Okay, but for my case, because I just want to be safe, I'm going to use the UUID because I know that this is going to be randomly generated every single time. So now that we have that on the top left, we know that our image is being displayed. What I'm going to do is the following. Alongside the image, I want to go ahead and render another view. And once again, the view is like a div. And inside this view, I want to render some text. And the text is going to say the user dot, let's check the API. It should say the user dot name dot first name and then last name. So I'm going to say user dot actually wait a minute, it should say user dot name. Okay, user dot name dot first, and then it should say user dot name dot last. So save it, and we should see some text happening right there. So the text is right there. Let's go ahead and change it up. Let's give this a class name. Let's say text white, and let's say text dash large to make it a bit bigger. And there we go. There is the name. And then inside this parent view for the image, I'm going to go inside here, give this a class name, and then I'm going to say flex dash row. And something else that I should mention is that in React Native, everything is already a flexbox. So you don't need to add the class of flex here every single time. So I'm going to say flex row here, and then items dash center. We should now bring the text to the center. And then you know what? Let's go inside this parent view. Let's give this a class name of padding y of 20 and padding on the x of 4, so that this pushes downwards so that we can actually see what we are styling. And then right here, once again, I'm going to give this a gap of 2 to separate the image from the text right there. Once we have that, I'm going to go below this text, and then I'm going to add another text here that is going to say the date of birth of the person. So I'm going to say user.dob.age and then years, and this is coming from the API. You can just study it, and you're going to see that this one is 46 years. And then give this a class name, and I'm going to say text stone dash 400, so that you can actually see it right there. So text on 400. Let me say text base, because by default it is just a bit smaller in font. And then once we render the age in years, I want to render a comma, and then I'm going to say user.dob.date, which is going to render the date of birth of the person. But of course, it renders it in this gibberish, which we are going to correct right away by opening up our terminal and installing a package that is called datefns. So let's go ahead and say loading. Let's go ahead and say npm install date-fns. And so once it installs, we can go back to the top and we can import a method here called format from date-fns /format. And then the way we use it is we go where we want our date, and then we're going to cut this out, and then we're going to say format format, type in please. Okay, so format, and then we want to pass in new date, and then inside the new date we want to pass in the data that we want to format, the date that we want to format, and then place a comma, and then we're going to say that we want to format in the form of DO, and then month, 4 M's capital, and then YYYY small. And when you save that, then it's going to render, it's going to format the date properly. Please reload. There we go. So loading, and there we go. So we have 24th October 1969 for this person. Now, if you don't want to render the superscript of the number like 24th, then all you have to do is just remove this O and render another D, and it is going to render just the date. But I like it better like this. So 24th of May, or the 16th of May 1955, and then the age of the person. So once you have that, what we need to do next is the following. I'm going to go here and I'm going to give this a border, and then I'm going to give it a border of stone-700, which is going to have this slight border, and then I'm going to give it a padding all round of 4, and then a rounded edge, just like that. And this is going to be the style for all our divs. Now, once we do that, let's go below this part, and then we're going to render another view. And then inside this view, we're going to render some text here, and the text is going to say personal details. And then let's style it out. Let's give it a class name, and then let's say text white font bold text 2XL, just to make it big, and we have personal details right there. Now I want to separate this second div, or let me not say div, I want to separate this second view from this first one. So what I'm going to do is go inside the parent, which is this one right here, and then I'm going to give it a class of space, so space -y-4 main. And what space y4 does is that it adds a margin on the top and bottom right there, so that once I save it, then it just adds some margin. It's kind of like how grid works, but you don't have to specify a grid for everything, you know. So once we do that, then what we're going to do is this. We're going to go back here, give this a class name of border, and border stone 700 and rounded, and then padding all round of 4, which is going to do that for the personal details. And then once we do that, let's go below it, and then we want to enter another view. You can see that this is something that is reoccurring. So inside this view, we want to render some text. Now the text is going to be as follows. So we want to render personal details. What is personal details? Let's take a look. So we want to render the name, now the full name, including the title. So we're going to say this. We're going to say that we want to render the user dot name dot title, and then copy this down, and then we want to render, and actually don't copy it down, really copy it down, because you can just render it here, inside here, add a space, and then user dot name dot first, and then finally user dot name dot last, and then save it, and we should be seeing right there. So it is blacked out. Let's give it a class name, and let's say text, what is it, text stone, what did I use, text on 400. So text on 400 -400. There we go, looking fantastic. And then what I want to do is I want to render some kind of name or some kind of text here, which is going to be descriptive of what we are showing to the user. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm going to render some text here that says name, or maybe I can say full name. So full name, so full name, and then the name of the person. And then let's go ahead and make this bigger. So text base, which is going to increase its font size just a bit. There we go. So full name. Now I want to style it differently. Once again, I want full name to be whitened out. So I'm going to render another text component here, and then render the full name inside. Okay, so this is how it looks like. This is how it looks like. So text, and then text component inside, and then inside here I'm going to say give this a class name of text -white. And I hope this works. I don't know whether it's going to work, but it usually works on the web. So there we go. So text white, and then font bold, just to differentiate it, font bold, and then let's say margin right of 2 to push away from the text just a bit, or it doesn't push away. So what you can do is we can just go here and say space on the x-axis of 2, which now push it away. I hope. No, it doesn't. Oh, you know what? It's because of this. I should go inside the view, give this a class name of space dash x-2. I hope that doesn't mess up with my other styles. Okay, it's not working. It's not working. So let's just remove it. Let's remove it, and then let's go inside this personal details text. Let's give it a margin bottom of 4 to push it away from the details. There we go. Now, once we have the full name, we can have the age. So we can just go below. Where should we do it? Let's go below this. Let's render a view here, and then we can render some text that says age. And then, you know what, the structure is going to be the same. So let's just copy this part, copy and paste it here. And we don't need all of this. We don't need all of this. We can just say user dot what was it for showing the name? What did I use inside here? user.dob.age, user.date of birth.age, years for the text. And then this is going to say age. Save it, and we should see that. And you know what, I just realized I don't think we need this div. I don't think we need this extra div. We can safely remove it, but then we can cut this out and place it inside this view so that the text can be like just flowing one on top of the other. Nothing should change on the screen. So we have the age, and then we have date of birth. So we can just copy this part, copy, paste, and we need to format the date of birth once again. So we're going to say format, and then pass in new date, and then inside here we're going to say user.dob.date, and then we'll format it in the form of do, month, and then year. And then we can remove the text that says years. So we can now change this text to say date of birth. Save it, and we should see date of birth right there. Okay. And then now that we have some text here, I want to separate them out just a bit. You can see it's a bit crowded. So we're going to go inside the parent div, inside the parent view, give this a class name of, once again, space dash y dash 4 to separate out the content inside here. That is too much. Let's say space y2. And we're going to have that. Fantastic, looking nice. Now, once you have the date of birth, what else can we show inside here? So we can show the nationality. I know the nationality is somewhere. Let's see, country right here. So it's inside the location object, and then it is called country. So we can just go ahead and copy this once again. So copy, paste. You can change this to say nationality. And then we don't need the format new date, but we can just say user.location.country. And then when you save it, then we should have the nationality of the person. And this is not nationality, this is country. Because nationality in this case would be Canadian, you know. So let's go ahead and save that, and it should now say country. And what I remember from the API is on the bottom, it has this that says NAT, which is basically the initials of the country, really. So what we can do is we can just place a comma here, and then we can say user.nat, which is the nationality, and it's going to place a comma and say like Ukraine, UA, and then if you go ahead and reload it, it's going to render another person showing the correct thing. Now let's go back inside here. Now we have our personal details. What I want to do is I want to go ahead and copy this entire view for the personal details. So just copy it. So copy this entire thing, paste it below, and then instead of personal details, I want to render address. Let me say address and what is it called? Address and city, for example. And then what you need to do is just remove all this, and then we can now begin to render the address. So address, let's remove this text, and then let's take a look at the API. The API says what? For the address, what do we need? The location. So location.street.number. So we can go back inside here. We can say we want to render the user.location.street.number. I think that is how it is. Yeah. So let's go ahead and save it. Let's see what we have. We should render another div. There you go. So address there, and then we have the number, and then we want to render the street name. So we're going to place a comma and say user.location.street. What is it called? .name. So .street.name, so that it can actually say like what, 136, and then this name, which I'm not going to attempt to pronounce because I can't. And then once you have that is the address, we can render the city. So we can just copy this text, really copy, and then we can change this to city, and then can remove this. And then let's see for the city, where's the city located? So location.city, and then we can just copy this down, change this to state. So state, oops, what have I done? I have done something, so change this to state. So location.city, sorry, location.state, and then what else? We don't need the postal code really. I mean, you can add it in if you want. I don't want to add it in. But then the email, or the email can fall under personal details. So under personal details right here, we can copy this, paste it below. We can say, we can remove this, and we can say that location user.email should be it. User.email, because email is on its own. So user.email, save it, and let's see what you have on the screen. So you have that. So address 6 New Street. Wait, does it show the city? It shows the city. So this is not how addresses are written. Why didn't I realize that? So the way addresses are written is that the location number, the street number, then the street name, and then the city. So we need to cut this out from here, and we need to replace it. We need to add a comma here, and then just add our city, so that it shows the address, the number, and then the street name, and then the city. Yeah, there we go. That's how addresses are written. Now that we have that, let's see, do we need anything else from the API? We don't need the logins. We don't need this. We can have the cell phone. So for the phone, I'm going to render the phone inside the address and city instead of inside the personal details. So what I'm going to do is this, right below, copy this text, I'm going to paste it here, and then I'm going to say cell, and then just this is going to say user.cell, should be it, user.cell, yes, and then save it, and we should save the cell phone. There we go. Fantastic. Anything else? They were already using the image, and I think that's it. Now that we have that, we need to go ahead and add a button here, which is going to generate random users for us. So what I'm going to do is this, I'm going to go outside of this div, of this view, I keep saying div, and then you know what, outside of this entire thing where we're mapping, outside of the map here, where does the map end? The map ends here. So right below this should be it. I'm going to render a button here, and I'm going to use a component that is called touchable opacity. So touchable opacity, and it does exactly what the name entails. So touchable opacity. So what it does is when you touch it, then the opacity fades out just a bit. Now something is wrong here. I should not render it here. Let me just render it outside of this. So touchable opacity, and then inside here I want to render some text inside the touchable opacity. So render some text, and the text is going to say search, or let me say get another random user, and then save it, and the text appears here. That's not where I want it to appear, so cut this out. I want it to appear right below this. Save it, and we should now be able to see it. So get another random user. There we go. Now for this one, I'm going to give this text a class name of padding on the y of 2, padding on the x of 4, rounded, and then bg stone dash 600, and then text white, and then font bold. This is white with one eye, so font bold, and then text base, and then save it. Let's see what you have, and we have that. Now look at this. The way the touchable opacity works is if I click on this, then the opacity fades out, which gives some kind of feedback to the user, and then when I stop clicking it, then it fades back in. So that is how the touchable opacity works. So once we do that, then I don't like this background, so let me say background 900, so that it is darker than our background for the body. I don't know, does that look okay? Let's go with a bright color. Let's check for a bright color here. Orange 400. Let's say orange 400. How does that look? I mean, we can use that. We can use that. It blends properly with the stone color. And then now let's see. Let's change this to text. Let's say text stone 900. Let's see, is that readable? I think that is readable. And then for the touchable opacity, I don't want this to stretch out. So I'm going to say give it a class name of items-start. We should now bring it here. There we go. So once again, like I said, when you're using React Native, everything is already a flex item. So you don't need to keep on adding the class of flex on everything. So get another random user. Now let's add the onClick event for this so that when you click on it, then it's going to trigger our function. So I'm going to say onClick. And the function that we created is called get user. There we go. So save it. And then now when I click on get another random user, it should generate a random user for me. Generate another random user for me. Okay, so our, oh, you know what? It's not on click, it's on press. On press, because we're in React Native. So you press on items on a mobile screen. So let's try it again. So get another random user. And there we go. You can see that our loading state is working. Another random user. So our loading state, and then once it finishes loading, then it displays it to the screen. Looking fantastic. Now what I want to do is this. I want to figure out why this spacing is not working and how we can fix it actually. Okay, so what we're going to do is this. I'm going to start with the full name. So right where we have full name, what I'm going to do is just add a space here, and that should add a space. Let's see, there we go. So it adds a space. And then for the title, once the title completes, I want to add a full stop so that we can just be, you know, grammatically correct. So there we go. And then right here, once again, add a space, and then here add a space, and then here add a space, and then space. Wait a minute, this should not say contact, this should say email. And then right here on the address, add a space, add a space, add a space, and okay, save it. That should be it. And we should have spaces in between. That is, I think that is much better, much better. Now look at this component. If you take a look at it, it is extremely huge. It is extremely huge. So we need to get a way to refactor this. So that is why I said in our Tailwind config, I said that we would create a components folder. So what I'm going to do is inside my workspace here, I'm going to create a new folder called components. And then inside here, we're just going to refactor our application. So the first component that I'm going to create is personal details. So we can just cut out this entire view for the personal details, cut it out. And we know that we're going to be rendering a component called personal details that we're going to create. So let's go ahead and create it. So inside our components, create a new file. Oh my god, why is new file called personal details.js. And then inside here, I'm using an extension called ES7 plus React Redux and React Native snippets. So I can say React Native function component, or rather React Native function, and it's going to create a function component for me. And all I need to do is just replace this with whatever I copied. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and save that, but our application is going to break. And it's going to break because it doesn't have access to this component doesn't have access to the user. So all you need to do is just destructure the user as props inside here. And then now when we import this, we just need to go ahead and say that for the user prop is going to be equal to the user object, and the user object is what we are mapping over here, the object that we get back when we map over our items here. So now let's go ahead and import this. So just go to the end of this control spacebar, and then just click on this drop down, and it's going to import it for you. And you can see that nothing should change on the screen, but it says format does not exist. That is because we are using format right inside here without importing it from datefns. So I'm going to say import format from datefns/format. Save it, and there we go. So now everything should work correctly. So format doesn't exist. Why? It does exist. So let's reload our application, go back inside here, reload. And actually not, I'm the one on the wrong, because this is not format, it's format. There we go. So save it. And as our application is reloading, let's go ahead and continue refactoring. So this is address and city. So let's cut out this entire view. So right inside here, let's render address as our component. Let's create the component. So address.js, let's say React Native function, and then let's replace this part. There we go. And then let's destructure the user, and I think we should be fine. So save it. Let's go ahead and render it. So control spacebar right here, render it, and then pass in user as a prop and save it. And then now we need this to finish reloading, please. Sometime today, maybe. Format does not exist. Why is it saying format does not exist in this? So date fns/format. Am I importing it wrongly? Am I importing it wrongly? How did I import it here? Import format from date fns/format. Let's copy this. Let's render it inside here. Let's paste it in. Is there a difference? There's no difference really. So personal details, is there something I'm doing wrong? So personal details from components, and then address. Let's see what's happening. What is happening? I don't think there's another issue really. And you can go ahead and refactor this part as well and place it inside another component. But now that this is a smaller component, I feel like it is much better, much easier to look at, you know. But you can go ahead and remove this as well. So what you can do is you can just cut it out. You can create a component, for example, the avatar, or rather than avatar, you can say profile. And then you can go ahead and create a component here called profile.js. And then you can say React Native function, and then just paste it inside here, and then destructure the user. And let's see, we need to import the image. So import image from React Native. And then what else? We need format here as well. So import format from date fns/format. That should be good. Save it. Let's make sure to import it. So control spacebar right there and import it. And nothing is showing up on the screen. It's very concerning. Very concerning. So it says cannot property undefined of picture. This should be in the profile. So it says user.picture.large. Why does it say that when it was working perfectly? I mean, let's paste it back inside here. Let's save it. Let's see whether it's going to work. So loading. So format does not exist. I mean, what? Format. You know what we can do is this. We can pass in a format prop here, and set it equal to the format that we import from datefns. And then when you go inside personal details, we can go ahead and destructure format as well, and then we can remove this import. And then let's see, is that going to work? Look at that. Just some things about React, you know. Now the profile, I want to render the profile, but the profile is not working. User.picture.large. The profile is not working. Let's remove this. Let's render profile. Let's save it. And you know what? User should be passed in inside here. So user is equal to user, and then save it. Oh, you know what? I hadn't passed in the prop, right? Yes, that was the reason I hadn't passed in the prop. But you can see that now we have refactored our component from those many lines of code, and we only have this. So we know that this is the profile component, which is the top one. And then wait a minute. This is now messed up. The styling is now messed up. It is because if these were inside views, then they would work. Would they? Let's try it out. So basically it inside a view. Would they work? Okay, so they work. So they need to be inside views. Okay, so save it. Now why is this one stretched out? Why are you stretched out? Why are you stretched out? Padding on the x of 10. Why is the first one stretched out? I don't know why. Let me say padding on the x of 6. I think 6 is better looking. Yeah, I mean, we can do 6. But why is this profile stretched out? Flex row item center. Gap 2. Adding all round of 4. Is it because of this? No. Is it because of the gap 2? No, gap 2 is still working. Padding all round of 4, we need it to push the items inside. Let's get another random user. It could be because of the name, maybe. Could it be? You know what? I'm not going to think about that for so long. What I want to do though is I want to add in some text on top here. I want to add in some text, and that will have to be added inside here. So the text here is going to say get random users for your application, and then save it, and it should appear somewhere on top here. There we go. Let's style it out. Let's say give this a class name of text center, text white, font bold, text 3XL, margin bottom 8, and we should have that. There we go. So would you look at that? Oh, here's the scroll view coming into play. So now that we have like the content like kind of goes beyond the maximum height, because we have padding on the top here and padding on the bottom as well. So we have a scroll view. Now, if I were to go ahead and remove this prop here that says shows horizontal scroll indicator, then we should be able to see a scroll bar. Let me bring this here. And it doesn't show really, but a scroll bar usually shows up. And if I were to change this into a view, you will notice that we won't be able to scroll our application. As you can see, we can't scroll anymore. Even though for this particular one, not scrolling doesn't really have an effect, because or rather, let me say for my phone, because the height is big enough to accommodate all the content. But what you typically want is a scroll view, and my computer's just hung. Fantastic. Okay, there we go. So scroll view. There we go. Fantastic. So now all you need to do is just commit this to GitHub. So let me open up a GitHub repository here. So GitHub. And so I'm going to say create a new repository here. And then let me maximize this. Let's create a new repository. And for this one, I'm going to call this React native random user. And then create repository. And then let's copy this. Let's go back inside our workspace. We can shut all of this down. Let me open up a new terminal here. And then let me say git add components. Okay, really. And then git commit. And I'm going to say app components. And then git add app.js git commit, and I'm going to say render components and fetch data. And then git add barbell.config.js git commit, and I'm going to say add native wind plugin. And then git add package, both of them, and then git add tailwind.config.js, and then the commit for them is going to say git commit -m, and I'm going to say install Tailwind CSS, and then git remote add origin, and then paste in our link, and then git push git branch -M main to push it to change it to the main branch, and then git push -u origin main, and there we go. So we're just going to wait for this to finish, and then once it finishes, we can go back into GitHub, we can reload the page, and we should be able to see everything. There we go. So we have successfully completed that. I don't have a readme, but I'm going to leave this link in the description if you want to check it out. And that is going to be the end of the video. And so if you enjoyed it and if you learned something new, you can show your appreciation by leaving a like on the video and subscribing to the channel if you're not already. And I will see you in the next video. Bye bye.